Welcome to Voices from Cambridge, a podcast about the people behind the university.
In each episode, we explore their journeys and what Cambridge has meant to them.
We are your hosts, Annie
and Alia.
Our aim is to open up Cambridge and share conversations that connect and inspire.
With a special thanks to the Wolf Institute for hosting us. Thank you for being here. In this episode, we speak with Maya about her journey to Cambridge in 1964 and the path that led her from studying languages and literature to becoming a gardener at Clare College and everything beyond. Maya, tell us about your journey to Cambridge at 19 in 1964. What was it like for a woman back then?
Well, it's a long time ago now because I'm 80 years old. But yes, I came to Cambridge after leaving school. I'd been studying English, French and Latin at school. I had some inspiring teachers there. My school was in Bedford, and it seemed natural to carry on with my studies in languages and literature, which I actually loved. I enjoyed it, and then came a time when I suppose I should probably say something about what it was like being a student in Cambridge. I wasn't at the university, I was at the Cambridgeshire College of Arts and Technology, which is now Anglia Ruskin, in fact. Apart from the studies, we had some great teachers. Many of them were from the university. And mainly it was then about social life, and that was connected with the university, really. We soon, especially as a woman, we were involved in parties and things like that were going on at the university. And we all soon had boyfriends at the university as well. So, so that's how all that happened. And enjoyed very much the cultural life and the events happening at the university, which we were very happily involved in. Although there was town and gown at the time, I don't know if there still is, but we never really felt it because we were always included, and people at the university are very happy for us to be involved in their events as well. So it was a happy time.
Wow, that's I think town and gown does still exist. But I think, people have very different experiences, and it's nice to hear that your experience was a positive one. Definitely. What first attracted you to languages and literature? What languages were you studying?
Well, it was my 3 A-level subjects were English, French and Latin. And I suppose you do them because you're good at them at school. We didn't really have a careers advice as such. It just seemed natural to carry on with them after leaving school.
Right.
I always loved reading ever since I was 4 years old. My mother used to tell me that I could read before I went to school. And I just flourished reading, loved French literature. Latin was obviously a bit more difficult, but I still remember Virgil and people like that, the poets. And of course, English I just revelled in. I loved the literature and still do, really. And I go back to my same books, in fact, some of them, and read some of these things again.
How did you find yourself working at Cambridge University Library, and what was it like?
Well, as a student here, obviously I was aware of different things around Cambridge. And in those days, there was no online, but I remember getting a copy of the Cambridge Evening News, as it was then, and seeing an advertisement. I suddenly felt, when it was about June time, and I'd sat my final exams, I thought, gosh, I've got to earn some money now to keep myself.
Oh, yeah.
So I looked in the Cambridge Evening News and I saw an advertisement for assistant librarians at the university library and applied and got the job just like that. And I went to work in the foreign department, first of all, because of my languages. And I was cataloguing books there, which was interesting. One thing I always loved was book covers. I know that might seem a strange thing to say, but I was so sad because I knew the amount of effort that had gone into making a cover and designing it, and they were thrown away into the waste paper baskets. And I used to collect them and bring them home because they were just so beautiful, some of them. But I was obviously a low-down person, really. in the foreign department, just cataloguing books. You know, I had piles of books around my desk, and I was hiding in the middle of them. But I made some good friends there, friends which I still have, in fact. It was many stories, of course, but most of the departments there were run by men, and the women were the assistants who did the basic groundwork. One thing, because it was the 60s, coming into the 70s, one thing that I'm quite proud of is the fact that I was one of the first women to actually wear trousers.
How did that go about?
Well, I was leading such a different life outside work,
Right.
because of the 1970s, and there was so much freedom. And, you know, Cambridge was full of hippies at the time, and it was all about music and dressing really beautifully in sort of flower power days. And it was just natural that I dressed like that. I knew I had to be smart.
Right.
I mean, everybody else, all the other women were wearing skirts and blouses and high-heeled shoes. And I suddenly, you know, outside work, I wasn't wearing any of those things. And I just started, I knew I had to look smart, but I could dress up in my favourite clothes as long as I looked smart. And nobody made a comment, so I just carried on doing it. So it was flared trousers and embroidered things. And yeah, there was one other person who was more senior than I who wore trousers. She had a trouser suit. And I only ever saw her in a trouser suit. But once I started, then other people started wearing trousers as well, which was great. You know, the structure at the University Library was very hierarchical and male-oriented. And I remember I did 2 or 3 years in the foreign department, and then one day I was called to see the librarian, who was a man who had his office up on one of the top floors. And I had no idea why I was going to see him. Nobody had said anything at all to me. But I went up and quivered in my shoes outside his door, knocked on the door and went in. And he told me that my job was changing just out of the blue, and that I was now going to be a sort of liaison officer between the library and the binding department. Because it's quite useful to have somebody in the binding department who could transliterate and read foreign languages and things like that. So then I moved and had my own office, and I had a wonderful time with the binders. They were such good fun. And it was very interesting to see what went on with books there. I had an assistant who would go and look for difficult things which I couldn't find on the shelves because there were so many books in the library.
Yeah.
But so I did that for 2 or 3 years. And one of my escapes, because I began to feel that I was in prison there, really, because it was so dark and everybody was walking around hushed and quiet because you couldn't disturb anybody. And it wasn't my nature. And so I had a friend there who used to work on the Taylor Schechter manuscripts. And we used to, this is one good thing of the library, was that you could build up holiday time by taking what's called blue slip leave. You worked an extra half hour every day, and so you could build up extra holiday. And we used to, when we got a lovely sunny day, we used to burst out of the library and go off up into Grantchester Meadows and sunbathe by the river. That was our escape. So I was there for 5 years, and then I really felt I needed a change. Although obviously I loved books and I loved many things about the library, but at the end of the day, I found it boring.
Yeah. So where did you find yourself after that?
Well, I left the library to take a job on an underground magazine, which was called, there was a little bookshop on the corner of New Square called Land of Cocaine. And it was run by 2 very interesting people who had fingers in all sorts of pies. And I worked for them as a diary editor just for a year. It wasn't that much money, but it was fun to do, especially if you led a sort of hippie life outside, outside work, you know. So that was interesting. And that was the next job I had, which just lasted for a short time.
Yeah.
But yeah, So that's where we've reached.
Yeah, you traveled overland to India in 1967.
Yeah.
How did that journey shape you?
Well, it was a wonderful opportunity. Strangely, I'd always loved the idea of India. And I remember when I was 12 years old and living in Australia, my family was there. I had to do a project at school, and I chose to do one on India because it fascinated me, the idea of it. And nearly all the pictures in my project came out of the National Geographic magazine. So I was in Cambridge one day, and this is when I was at the library, and I walked through Trinity College. And in those days, you could walk freely through all the colleges, which was lovely. And I looked in an archway there. I used to read the notices to see what sort of things were going on. And there was a little notice up that said, a Commonwealth expedition to India. If you're interested, come to this meeting. So I went to the meeting and signed up. I didn't know how I was going to pay for it or anything, but I thought, this is it, India at last.
Yeah.
And so I went to the meeting, and the rest of that is history, because I was then on Cambridge University expedition. It was an expedition which ran from, I think, 11 universities in the country, and each university had a coach going overland to India, and I was on the Cambridge coach. And it was absolutely marvellous.
How many other people were on the coach?
There should have been 30, but we ended up with about 25, I think,
Okay.
for various reasons. And we set off, and it was like the whole summer vacation. We set off and went through all the countries in Europe, and then Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and to India, overland. And it was, I was in my element. I just loved it.
Overland?
Yes, overland.
How many hours did that take?
How many months?
Yeah. Well, we went for the whole summer vacation, so that was 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm thinking the school vacation, which is 6 weeks, but 3 months makes sense.
3 months. I'm thinking about it because we set off, I think, in June,
Yeah.
and we came back when it was autumn, so it could have been slightly longer than 3 months. Yeah. We were actually, we stayed at amazing places with students in other universities in their rooms, on their roofs, and we camped. Most of it was camping. And I was very happy to do this because my family and I had always camped, and could cope with it all. Not all members on the coach could, had to say.
Yeah.
But it was one of the things I've loved in my life is travelling through landscapes. And that's especially what I remember, really, about that trip. I was a navigator. I'd been trained by the military at Eltham Palace on a navigation course. So I was one of the 3 people. We had 3 cooks, 3, first aiders, 3 navigators. And I was very lucky because it meant I sat at the front next to the driver. So I had the most fantastic view of all these countries we drove through, and just loved it. I didn't like going to sleep because I might miss some.
Did you ever drive?
No, I didn't drive. We had 3 drivers who'd been on a special training course. It was quite interesting because one of the people who helped to organise this whole Commonwealth expedition had been military, and he had access to us using various military places and intelligence. And I mean, for example, on my navigating course, we realised that there were no roads through Afghanistan. And so I've still got the map somewhere in my attic. And we just drove through the desert. We followed car tracks, So astonishing things happened. And it was a wonderful time. It really was.
Yeah, I don't see that happening today.
No, not at all. I think there was a problem. We were supposed to come back out by a slightly different route, which went through Iraq, but there was a slight problem in Baghdad at the time, I think. So we didn't actually go through there. We came back the same way that we went. But yeah, no, I'm still friends with some of the people I went with.
Yeah.
One of them who lives in Cambridge, or 2 who live in Cambridge, really. Yes.
I can see that as being such a formative experience.
Well, it taught you how to live together as a team and help each other, which was marvellous. And it was a cultural exchange all the way. We put on plays and music concerts with the universities we visited and places like that. So that was fun too. But
Yeah.
mainly it was about the people I was with and the landscape I went through.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the two main points, really.
How did you move from languages to horticulture?
Well, after yes, it dates back a long way. My mother tells me that when I was a toddler, I used to pick flowers and bring them to her in a little bunch. I always loved plants. In fact, in my mind's eye now, I can go back to my first garden, must have been when I was 5 or 6, and I can walk round that garden and I can name all the plants with their botanical names, which I didn't know at the time. But everything about nature and gardens and things had a strong impact on me, I guess, and it always has. So after I worked at Land of Cocaine, went to India, I came back one day. I had no job. I needed another job, and some of my friends said, "Oh, there's jobs going at the NIAB, which is the National Institute of Agricultural Botany, which at the time had their big buildings along the main road up Castle Hill, out along there." And so, we felt so free in those days, and there were so many jobs available. You never had to worry. One day I just cycled up there and asked for a job and was given a student job for the summer. So this was fantastic for me because I'd always wanted to be outside and working. So I found myself, in fact, for 2 summers, going up there and doing that, and I was categorising wheat crops to start with, and then herbage, which is grasses and clovers, and made a lot of friends there. Had a wonderful time driving Land Rovers across the fields and looking at 56 characteristics of wheat, in a little notebook and marking them all down. And I just felt in my element out there. It was just wonderful. Still have friends from there as well. And then in between, I think that was the time I went to Scotland after the summer job came to an end, and went and stayed with a friend on a croft up there. So that was NIAB, and I was there for 5 years.
In Scotland?
No, in working at NIAB, but with this break in the middle to go to live in Scotland for a few months. Yeah.
Mia, what's a croft?
Oh, I guess it's an old-fashioned term in a way, although, no, maybe not so old-fashioned. It's probably still called a croft. These tiny little sort of 2-room cottages or thatch cottages, or where people who eked out an existence, either fishing or and growing a few vegetables around their home, have been there. They've been there for centuries.
Yeah.
And this friend of mine had a croft, staying on a croft, and she'd had a bad accident, and she needed people to look after her. And I'd met her in Cambridge, and she invited me up there. And we had this. She lived in a tiny croft, 2-room croft, right up in northwest Scotland between Lochawe and Little Lochawe, and on a peninsula. There were no roads going to the peninsula, so to get there I had to do an overnight coach from Cambridge, then a train to Inverness, then a bus that took me out on the other side of the loch. And the postman rowed over in a little rowing boat, and I had to jump down off the jetty into the rowing boat, and he rowed me back over to the other side. And I stayed there for a few months with Illa, and she also had staying with her a chap from the Scott Polar Research Institute, who had been somebody who I think it was in the Antarctic, had been a person who looked after the scientists when they went out on their expeditions to make sure that they were okay. So he was a good person to, help look after things up there. So, yeah, no, it was an interesting time. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful place. Wild, out of reach.
Yeah.
And the stunning landscape, of course.
Let's go back to Cambridge now. Can you please tell us about Clare College and becoming their first woman gardener?
Yes. Well, it was coming back from Scotland. The night I came back, probably on an overnight coach or something, there must have been something open, because I bought a copy of the Cambridge Evening News, and looked in it. I used to really love the Cambridge Evening News because I loved to find out local things that were going on. And I always looked through the advertisements, and I saw this advert for a gardener at Clare College. Now, I knew the gardens at Clare because during my time working at NIAB, I'd started studying horticulture as well. And I used to go on day release to do City and Guilds horticulture. First of all, 2 years of ornamental horticulture, then 2 years of commercial horticulture. And I had a wonderful lecturer there, Mervyn Smith, who used to take us on the odd outing to go and see some fine examples of horticulture. And he'd taken us to Clare College, so I knew it. And I thought it was totally wonderful. Couldn't believe there was an advert in the paper. And so I thought, this is it. What I did was I caught the bus, the 7 o'clock bus. I was living in Fulbourn at the time. I had a cottage there. I caught the bus into Cambridge, went straight down to the Porter's Lodge at Clare, and I was there before the gardeners arrived. And I just waited there with the porters until the head gardener came up to collect his post, which must have been about 8 o'clock in the morning. And I told him, I said, I've come about the job. And he took me around the garden, and we had a chat, obviously walking round. And he gave me the job there and then. I had the right background. You know, I'd been working at NIAB, which was related to horticulture. And yeah, I forgot to say that I also had a job in between all these things. I'd forgotten about this. I had a job as a gardener at Fulbourn Old People's Home for a year. I was living in Fulbourn at the time. But it wasn't a very good job, and so that's why I left there. That's probably when I went to Scotland, actually, and then came back. So, yeah, so the beginning of my favourite job in all the world. And I had the most wonderful time. And Clare College was extremely nice to me. I made friends with several people there, including the bursar and the assistant bursar. And I was friends with them until they both passed away. And I still love going back and visiting. It was a wonderful place. I was lucky to have a head gardener who was willing to teach me, so I was in my element. And the lessons I learnt there, I still use now. I was friends with the head gardener till he died recently. And it was very interesting to see the techniques that he used. He was one of the old school, Brian Arban, who learnt from the previous head gardener. So he had all the wonderful old experiences and teaching from an original gardener. And it was wonderful to see the economies that the garden economies, things like using wine boxes from the kitchens to use for propagating plants in and things like that.
So quite creative.
Yeah, very. And so, yes, I started at Clare as a gardener in 1979. It was April. I remember pricking out plants at a sort of trestle table outside the greenhouse, and a cascade of wonderful clematis in full flower just coming down behind me. It was a wonderful time.
Sounds like it was a wonderful time. How were you received as a woman gardener at Clare?
That was very interesting. I was their first one. I suppose 650 years it was then. And I'm quite surprised looking back that the head gardener just took me on as a first woman just there and then. But because he was quite traditional in many ways, but he did. And I got on with all the gardeners really well, and with the head gardener and the assistant bursar. And people at Clare were very kind to me. I remember once mowing the 4 squares in the first courtyard. And the master came out to have a chat with me because I was the first girl he'd seen doing it. So that was fun. And I used to love going into the private places like the master's garden and the scholar's garden to cut the grass and work on the borders. And it was a lot of people came from abroad to visit these gardens. So you'd have people going through when the garden was open in the afternoons. who would come and talk to me because they'd never seen a girl standing there working in the borders holding a besom broom, which they used to think of as a witch's broom, and couldn't believe that I was still using this medieval bit of equipment.
Yeah.
But no. So I felt when I worked there, when the garden was closed, I felt this is my garden.
Yeah.
Nobody else is coming and it's all for me.
Yeah.
But then in the afternoons when it opened, I felt that all the world was coming to me. You know, they were coming down the river, they were coming to visit, they were coming to talk to me. I didn't have to go anywhere. It was a marvellous place. And I made good friends there and had an extremely happy time. I was still studying horticulture. I ended up in the end with my Master of Horticulture. So I did go away to college a couple of times, but the head gardener was wonderful, and he knew I loved it. And he even gave me a key to the gate, and that felt like the final honour to be able to go into the gate whenever I liked. I used to hate weekends because I wasn't there, and I often used to go back at weekends and walk around because I didn't want to miss anything that was happening. You know,
that's such a wonderful relationship with the gardens.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I was in love with the gardens.
Yeah. I
did write a poem about them. I was going to bring it, but I couldn't find it. If I ever find it, I'll let you have it.
Yes, please.
But it's the first time that I really felt that I'd fallen in love with a place, and that was extraordinary, really. I realised that, you know. And in fact, when I did finally leave, I used to come back in the holidays, of course. Every holiday I had, even when I'd started teaching, I used to come back and spend all my holiday in Clare Garden, working with the gardeners. The head gardener was wonderful in letting me do it. And I had all my friends there, and it really was, you know, there were times like during public holidays, so you'd have a bank holiday. I would always volunteer to be the one who was in the garden because we always liked to have somebody there to look after it, make sure it was all right. And I used to volunteer to go in there and have the day to myself in the whole garden, working there, you know. And my friends used to come and visit me in the garden, and the head gardener was wonderful. He let me take people round and tell them all about the garden and things like that.
And you'd be the perfect person to tell people about it.
Oh, well, it's very sweet of you to say so. But I just loved it. You know, I was in love with that garden. That's a great experience. And it broke my heart to leave there, to tell you the truth.
How long were you at Clare Gardens for?
Well, it was a number of years, because in between I had to go away to college to get my qualifications. So over, I don't know, maybe 5 years I was around. And then in the end I went off to take my final qualification. And at the end of that, my college, which was Horticulture College near Chelmsford, offered me a teaching job. Of course, gardening wasn't very well paid, although, for me it was just a pleasure working there. And it was an interesting experience working with different kinds of people. Even things like on Friday afternoon, the head gardener would come round with your pay packet that had, I think, about £40 in it. That was my week's pay. And give us, there it was in cash in this little envelope. And I used to feel so proud of getting my gardening money. Yeah.
What were you teaching? Can you please tell us?
What was I teaching?
Yes.
Well, I was a lecturer in horticulture and garden design, actually. And that was my job for 25 years.
And how did social changes in the 1960s and 70s show up at your workplace?
Well, I suppose being at Clare, it was extraordinary because they treated me so nicely. While I was there. The library was very different because I was a simple assistant, and I could be there or I could not be there, and you never really felt there that the work you did was valued somehow. You were just a part of the machine somehow. It was different at Clare. And I did hear afterwards at Clare that when the head gardener retired, the assistant bursar did say, "What about the girl who used to be here? Would she like to apply, do you think?" Unfortunately, the head gardener said, "Oh, she's away doing something completely different now." But he asked me afterwards, he said, I said to him, I would have considered it, you know, even though the pay wasn't very good, but it was such a wonderful job,
Yeah.
you know, my favourite job in all my working life.
That's so wonderful. So when did you start your job as a lecturer in horticulture?
That was in I was a student there first.
Right.
In 1982, and then I got the job to start in 1983. Yeah.
You were there for 25 years?
Yeah, I was there for 25 years. So one of the reasons I went there was because I had hurt my back, actually. I'd always said I didn't want to teach, as one often says these things, but I had slipped a disc in my back, and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to actually be a gardener with the physical side of it. So when they offered me a job at Clare College at the end of my year there, I said yes. And it wasn't as good as being at Clare, but at least I was working with plants, and I had a wonderful time with my students, especially on things like plant identification, which, because I'd studied Latin, I was good at, you know, plant names and things like that, all the taxonomy. So they were, you know, my students were wonderful. I had a wonderful time walking around the gardens at Clare College, telling them all about the plants.
Yeah.
And I taught some botany, which I had wanted to do all along, right from when I left school. In fact, when I was at the university library working, I used to write every year to Cambridge Botanic Gardens and ask if there were any jobs going. And I didn't tell them I was female because I thought no female's going to get a job there. So I just used to sign myself, Polley, but nothing ever came up.
Maya, what Clare College and Cambridge in general means to you personally?
Well, it still feels like one of my homes, to tell you the truth. I still have lots of friends here. I love the town. I really enjoy the colleges. I did love the cultural life. I loved the chapels in all the colleges. I loved the gardens in all the colleges. To me, it's still a thrill to come up and visit.
We are so grateful that you came up to visit today. You have this wonderful book that you gifted us with your artwork, and just to look through it is incredible.
Fascinating.
Could you tell us how your experience at Cambridge or your experience in horticulture inspires this book, if it does at all? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, the book is of poetry, which I have written over the last 20 years. And that really something that had its roots probably in my literary education, because I loved poetry. I always loved the romantic poets, and because of their connection with nature. And really, Clare, working at Clare with all the flowers and things, just, you know, reinforced all that and taught me to love plants in many different ways. So you will find that in the book that's just been produced, both the illustrations and the poems refer to this lovely connection that I've been able to have with nature, really, and that was reinforced at Clare.
I think they're wonderful.
And our last question is about your favorite Cambridge tradition, if you have one.
Yes, I thought about this. Obviously, there's many things I like. I love hunting on the river, the lovely cultural things that happened, like hearing Ravi Shankar in King's College Chapel and listening to the incredible string band in West Road. Is it Lady Margaret's Hall there? But I guess when I think about it now, I mean, I loved going to the May balls and all those sorts of things and the parties. But my favourite has to be the beautiful gardens that are maintained and held now by the university, because they are so valuable in many different ways to many different people, I guess. So they are a wonderful tradition to keep going, really. I mean, for them to spend the money they do on their gardens and their garden staff, and how the university here encourages high standards in their gardens, pays for garden staff, and you know, it has value beyond words. And really, if you ask people what it means to them, many of them will say, you know, it kept them sane, it inspired them, and it was a wonderful place to be, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Maya. That was.
Thank you so much.
Thank
We're
you for
so
sharing.
grateful.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for asking me. It's a pleasure, really, for me to visit Cambridge and to think about all these things again, which are part of my already long life.
We're so grateful to have you here today with us.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And so
sharing your
excited
journey
to
with us.
share it with everyone else.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.